The champagne was Dom Perignon, 2012 vintage. I knew because I watched the waiter pour it into crystal flutes at the table where I should have been sitting. Instead, I stood near the service entrance of the Ashford Grand Ballroom, nursing a glass of water with a wilting lemon wedge, watching my daughter-in-law glitter under the chandeliers like she owned the room. And around her neck, catching the light with every calculated turn of her head, was my necklace, Henry's necklace. The sapphire threw blue fire across the white tablecloths. Even from 40 feet away, I could see its heartbeat, the way the diamonds surrounding it seemed to breathe with each flicker of the candles. 40 years of marriage wrapped around the throat of a woman who had called it garbage. I am 65 years old. My name is Martha Calloway, and 3 hours ago, I didn't know if I would survive this night. The Ashford Grand Ballroom smelled of old money and fresh lilies. The charity gala for the Children's Hospital drew the same crowd every October. Women in gowns that cost more than some people's cars, men in tuxedos with watches worth small houses, and enough diamonds to fill a vault. The chandeliers above were original Venetian glass, installed in 1924, and they cast the kind of golden light that made everyone look younger, softer, richer. Everyone except me. I had been placed at table 14, the widow's corner as I'd come to think of it, near the kitchen doors where the clatter of dishes provided constant interruption, and far from the stage where the evening speeches would take place. My place card had been handwritten in elegant calligraphy, Mrs. Martha Calloway, but the placement spoke volumes about where I ranked in my own family's estimation. My son Derek sat at table 1. The head table, right next to Kimberly, who was currently leaning into the mayor's wife like they were old sorority sisters. They weren't. Kimberly had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport. Her mother, Pamela, had coached her since childhood on the art of transformation, how to walk, how to speak, how to make people believe you belonged in rooms that would have never let you through the door. And Kimberly had learned well. 8 years of marriage to my son had polished away every rough edge until she gleamed like the faker she was. But that necklace wasn't fake. That necklace was the most real thing in the entire room. I should tell you about this morning. I woke at 6, the way I always do. The house on Winthrop Lane is too quiet now. 3 years since Henry passed, and I still haven't adjusted to the silence. No coffee brewing when I come downstairs. No rustle of the newspaper, no off-key humming from the workshop in the basement where he used to spend hours with his tools and his stones and his secrets. The October light came through the bedroom windows pale and thin, the color of weak tea. I lay there for a moment, as I do every morning, with my hand on the cold side of the bed where he used to sleep. "Good morning, my love," I whispered. A ritual, a prayer. A small way to pretend he might still hear me. I showered, dressed in my robe, and padded down the hall to my vanity room. It's a small space, just a converted closet, really, but Henry had built the shelves himself, installed the mirror with the beveled edges, added the little brass hooks where I hang my favorite pieces. The velvet box was open. I stopped in the doorway, my hand frozen on the frame. The box, navy blue, embossed with Henry's initials in gold, sat on the vanity where I always kept it, but the lid was up. And inside, where the sapphire should have been nestled against cream silk, there was nothing. Nothing but emptiness and a folded piece of paper. My heart didn't race. That's what surprised me. Instead, it seemed to slow, to thicken, as if my blood had turned to cold honey in my veins. I walked to the vanity on legs that didn't feel like my own. I picked up the note with fingers that trembled only slightly. Kimberly's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. That aggressive, slanted script she used on birthday cards and grocery lists, and all the little notes she left around Derek's house, marking her territory. Taking this old 70s glass necklace for the gala. It's better than letting it rot on an old woman's neck. Don't worry, nobody will know it's fake. I read it 3 times. The cruelty wasn't surprising. Kimberly had been cruel to me for years, in ways both small and large. The the surprise party she'd forgotten to invite me to, the family photos where I was always positioned in the back, half hidden, the slow, systematic campaign to convince my son that I was difficult, demanding, stuck in the past. But this was something else. This was theft. I sat down on the small stool in front of the vanity, still holding the note. The mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized, gray hair pinned back, face pale, eyes red-rimmed. When had I become this person? When had I allowed myself to shrink so small? The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Henry's voice was still on the recording. I hadn't been able to change it. "You've reached the Callaways. Leave a message, and we'll call you back." We, as if he were still here, as if we were still a team. The beep sounded, and then Brenda's voice filled the room. "Martha, it's me. Just calling to wish you luck tonight. I hope Kimberly looks stunning in that old thing. I told her it would be perfect for the gala. Call me tomorrow and tell me all about it." My sister's voice was bright and cheerful and sharp as a knife slipped between ribs. She knew. Brenda knew. She had told Kimberly about the necklace, had probably laughed with her about the cheap glass our mother used to dismiss. Brenda, who had resented me since we were children. Brenda, who had never forgiven me for marrying a man who adored me while she cycled through 3 divorces. Brenda, who smiled at Thanksgiving dinners while plotting small destructions. I erased the message. Then I stood up, walked to my closet, and pulled out my black Chanel gown, the one Henry had bought me for our 30th anniversary, the one I hadn't worn since his funeral. If Kimberly wanted a war, I would give her one, but not the kind she expected. The ballroom blurred back into focus. A waiter passed with a tray of canapes, and I took one without thinking. Smoked salmon on a black pepper cracker, the kind of thing that used to make my mouth water, but now tasted like cardboard. At table 1, Kimberly laughed at something the mayor said. Her hand went to the necklace, fingers brushing the sapphire like it was a trophy she'd won. Derek sat beside her, nodding along, my beautiful boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard and now couldn't meet my eyes across a crowded room. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Calloway, confirming your 9 p.m. appointment. G.F." Gerald Finch, Henry's oldest friend, the man who held the insurance policy on every piece Henry had ever made, including the one currently adorning my daughter-in-law's neck. I typed back, "Confirmed." The evening was young, the speeches hadn't started, and Kimberly was still laughing, still glittering, still utterly unaware of what she had stolen. Not a cheap glass trinket from the 70s. A $1, $5 million masterpiece. I allowed myself a small sip of water and watched my daughter-in-law shine. Enjoy it, I thought. Enjoy every moment. Because by midnight, that necklace would be around my neck again, and Kimberly would be in handcuffs. She caught my eye from across the room. Her smile widened, sharpened, turned into something cruel and triumphant. She thought she had won. She had no idea the game was just beginning. Before we continue the story, leave a like and comment your age and where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story has reached. I didn't always hate my daughter-in-law. There was a time, brief, flickering, now almost impossible to remember, when I thought Kimberly might be good for my son. Derek had always been soft. Not weak exactly, but gentle in a way that worried me. He felt things too deeply, trusted too easily, and had a habit of seeing the best in people who didn't deserve it. When he brought Kimberly home for the first time, 8 years ago, I saw what he saw. A beautiful young woman with bright eyes and a quick laugh who looked at my son like he hung the moon. She was charming, attentive. She complimented my pot roast and asked Henry about his little jewelry shop with what seemed like genuine interest. I wanted to believe in her. The wedding was in June at the Ashford Country Club. White roses everywhere, 300 guests, a string quartet playing Pachelbel as Kimberly floated down the aisle in a gown that cost more than Henry's first car. Her mother, Pamela, sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the picture of maternal joy. I remember standing in the bridal suite before the ceremony, helping Kimberly with her veil. Her hands were steady, no bridal nerves for this one, and her eyes met mine in the mirror with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know," she said, adjusting a pearl earring. "Derek told me you weren't sure about me at first." I hesitated. "I just want my son to be happy." "Oh, he will be." She smiled, all teeth. "I'll make sure of it." At the time, I thought it was a promise. Now I know it was a threat. The first sign came 3 months after the honeymoon. Derek called to cancel Sunday dinner, something he'd never done in 32 years of life. "Kimberly's not feeling well," he said, his voice strange and flat. "Maybe next week." Next week became next month. Next month became, "We're so busy." The excuses piled up like snowdrifts, each one burying me a little deeper. Henry noticed too. "Give them space," he said, ever the optimist. "Newlyweds need time to build their own life." But I saw what he didn't, or what he chose not to see. The way Kimberly would check Derek's phone when she thought no one was looking. The way she'd interrupt him mid-sentence, finishing his thoughts with words he would never have chosen. The way his laugh, once so easy and bright, became performative, a sound made to please rather than express joy. She was remaking him, slowly, carefully, like a sculptor chipping away at marble until only her vision remained. The isolation campaign began in earnest after their second anniversary. It started with holidays. Thanksgiving at Pamela's house in Hartford. "Just this once, Mom. Kimberly's family hasn't seen us in so long." Christmas in the Bahamas. "We need a real vacation, you understand." Easter brunch canceled because Kimberly had a terrible migraine that miraculously healed in time for her charity luncheon that same afternoon. I kept a calendar. I'm not proud of it, but I did. I marked every missed dinner, every forgotten birthday call, every promise broken. By year 3 of their marriage, the pages were more red ink than black. Henry tried to intervene. He invited Derek to the workshop, the way he used to when Derek was a boy, hoping to rebuild the connection over shared work. But Derek came once, stayed an hour, and left with apologetic eyes and Kimberly's voice sharp in his ear through his phone. "She doesn't like him spending time here," Henry told me that night, his hands still dusty with jeweler's rouge. "She says I fill his head with old-fashioned ideas." "What ideas?" He smiled, sad and knowing. "That family matters, that love isn't a transaction, that a man should honor his mother." I wanted to fight, to march over to their sleek modern townhouse and demand my son back, but Henry counseled patience. "She'll show her true colors eventually," he said. "Derek's not stupid, he'll see." But Derek didn't see. Or maybe he saw and chose blindness because the alternative was too painful. The cruelties multiplied. Small at first, a comment about my dated fashion sense, a suggestion that I might be happier in a retirement community, a pointed question about whether I really needed all that space in the Winthrop Lane house. Kimberly delivered each barb with a smile, always in front of Derek, always phrased as concern. "I just worry about you, Martha. Rattling around in that big old house, it must be so lonely." Lonely. Yes, she made sure of that. Then Henry died. 3 years ago, on a Tuesday morning in April. He was in his workshop, working on a piece he wouldn't show me. "A surprise," he said, eyes twinkling. I heard the thud from the kitchen. By the time I reached him, he was already gone. "Massive heart attack," the doctors said. He wouldn't have felt a thing. I felt everything. The funeral was a blur of black suits and white lilies and casseroles from neighbors whose names I couldn't remember. Derek held my hand during the service, and for one brief moment, I had my son back. He cried on my shoulder. He promised to visit more. He said, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I haven't been here." Kimberly stood 3 feet away, checking her phone. Within a month, she had convinced Derek that his grief was unhealthy, that his visits to Winthrop Lane were enabling my depression, that the best thing he could do for me was give me space to heal. Space. That word again. As if distance were medicine and not slow suffocation. The visits stopped. The calls dwindled. My son became a stranger who shared my blood, but not my life. And Kimberly smiled and smiled and smiled. I didn't know about Brenda's betrayal until 6 months ago. My sister and I had never been close, not really. She was 3 years younger, the pretty one, the one our mother favored with her attention and her criticism in equal measure. I was the quiet one, the reader, the girl who preferred Henry's gentle courtship to the flashy suitors Brenda attracted and discarded. She married 3 times, divorced 3 times. Each husband left her a little richer and a lot more bitter. By 60, she had a comfortable condo in Westport, a collection of grievances as long as her arm, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. We exchanged Christmas cards, birthday calls, the occasional lunch where we talked about nothing and meant even less. Then Kimberly reached out to her. I don't know how it started, a Facebook message maybe, or a chance meeting at some charity event. But suddenly, Brenda and Kimberly were close. Having coffee, shopping together, whispering in corners at the one family gathering I was still invited to attend. She's lovely, Brenda told me, her voice dripping with false warmth. I don't know why you're always so hard on her, Martha. She genuinely cares about Derek. I should have known then, should have seen the alliance forming, the trap being set. But I was tired. Grief had hollowed me out, and I didn't have the strength to fight shadows. 6 months ago, Brenda visited the house. She wanted to see how I was doing. She wandered through the rooms, touching things, asking questions. When she reached my vanity, she paused. Is that the necklace Henry made you? The wedding one? Yes. She picked up the velvet box, opened it, let the sapphire catch the light. I always thought this was costume. Mom said Henry's work was, what did she call it? Hobbyist stuff. Mom was wrong about a lot of things. Brenda laughed, that brittle sound I'd known since childhood. Well, it's pretty enough, I suppose, for what it is. She put the box down, changed the subject, left an hour later with a hug that felt like a goodbye. 2 weeks after that visit, Kimberly started making comments about the necklace. How sad it was that I clung to fake jewelry from my dead husband's little hobby. How she'd love to borrow it sometime just to see what all the fuss was about. Brenda had told her, had confirmed every lie, had handed Kimberly the weapon she'd used to humiliate me, my own sister. Standing in the ballroom now, watching Kimberly preen, I understood the full architecture of the betrayal. It wasn't just a daughter-in-law who hated me. It was a mother-in-law who coached her, a sister who armed her, a son who abandoned me. A whole family turned against one old woman. But they had all made the same mistake. They had underestimated what Henry gave me. Not just a necklace, though that was worth more than all their schemes combined. He gave me 40 years of watching him work. 40 years of patience, precision, and the quiet knowledge that the most valuable things often look ordinary to untrained eyes. Kimberly thought she had stolen glass. She had stolen fire. And fire, as anyone who's lived long enough knows, has a way of burning those who carry it carelessly. The ballroom had a particular smell that night. Expensive perfume layered over lilies, champagne going flat in forgotten glasses, and beneath it all, something sharper. Ambition, maybe, or hunger. The scent of people who had learned to smile while calculating the exact value of everyone around them. I had moved from the service entrance to a pillar near the silent auction tables, where I could watch without being watched. The auction items gleamed under spotlights. A week in Tuscany, a private dinner with the governor, a painting by some artist whose name I couldn't pronounce. Rich people buying things they didn't need to prove they had money to spare. At table 1, Kimberly held court. She had positioned herself at the center of the round table, a queen among courtiers. The mayor sat to her left, his wife to her right. Derek was 2 seats down, close enough to be claimed, but far enough to be ignored. He was nursing a whiskey, his third by my count, and staring at the centerpiece like it held the answers to questions he was afraid to ask. Victoria Langley circled the table like a well-dressed vulture. She had her phone out, snapping pictures, recording snippets of conversation for the Ashford Social Gazette. Tomorrow's headline was already writing itself in her head. I could see it in the predatory gleam of her eyes. Kimberly Calloway, Ashford's rising star, or some such nonsense. A puff piece dressed up as journalism. Victoria had known Kimberly since their sorority days at UConn. They had climbed the social ladder together, stepping on the same fingers, covering for each other's sins. Now Victoria documented Kimberly's ascent while Kimberly fed her exclusives and access. A symbiotic relationship between two species of parasite. Then Pamela arrived. Kimberly's mother swept into the ballroom 20 minutes late, fashionably so, of course. She wore emerald green, a bold choice for a woman of 65, but Pamela had never believed in fading gracefully. Her silver hair was sculpted into a helmet of waves, her makeup applied with the precision of a Renaissance painter, her smile as sharp and false as her daughter's. "Darling!" Pamela descended on Kimberly with air kisses and theatrical embraces. "You look absolutely radiant, and that necklace—" She paused, fingers reaching toward the sapphire. "Where on earth did you find such a charming piece?" "Oh, this old thing?" Kimberly laughed, that practiced trill I had come to despise. "It's Martha's. I borrowed it. She wasn't going to wear it anyway. It's just been sitting in a box, collecting dust." Pamela's eyes flicked across the room, found me standing by the pillar, and dismissed me in a single glance. "How generous of her. It suits you much better, of course. Some women know how to wear jewelry, and some women just accumulate it." They laughed together, mother and daughter, their voices carrying across the ballroom like bells ringing for a funeral. My funeral, they thought. I should have left then. Should have slipped out the service entrance, gone home, called the police from the safety of my kitchen. But something held me there. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness, or the desperate hope that Derek might look up, see me, remember that he was my son before he was her husband. He didn't look up. Instead, Kimberly did. She spotted me across the room, and her smile widened into something that wasn't quite human. She leaned over to whisper something to Victoria, who giggled and raised her phone. Then Kimberly stood, champagne glass in hand, and began walking toward me. "Martha!" Her voice was loud enough to turn heads. "There you are. I was worried you hadn't come." I straightened my spine. 40 years of marriage to a man who taught me that dignity was earned through bearing, not bravado. Kimberly. "Ladies, come meet my mother-in-law." She turned back to the table, beckoning with perfectly manicured fingers. A cluster of women rose and followed. Gloria Ashworth, whose husband owned half the commercial real estate in Fairfield County. Diane Pemberton, chair of the hospital board. Helen St. Clair, old money and older grudges. They surrounded me in a semicircle of silk and judgment. "Martha was just telling me about this necklace," Kimberly continued, touching the sapphire again. "It's a family heirloom. Isn't that sweet?" "It's lovely," Gloria said, in a tone that meant it wasn't. "It was a wedding gift," I said quietly, "from my husband." "Her late husband," Kimberly clarified, as if death were a social demerit. "He had a little jewelry shop. Fixed watches, replaced batteries, that sort of thing. This was his attempt at fine jewelry." She laughed, shaking her head. Bless his heart, he really tried. The women exchanged glances. That silent language of mockery I had seen 1,000 times in 1,000 rooms. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, the old familiar shame of being found wanting. "Henry was a master craftsman," I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "He trained in Antwerp." "Is that what he told you?" Kimberly's eyes glittered with cruel amusement. "Martha, honey, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but this necklace is obviously costume. The stones are glass. Anyone with eyes can see that." She turned to the group. "It's sweet, really, how she believes it's real, sentimental value and all that." Diane Pemberton leaned in, squinting at the sapphire. "It does look rather cloudy. Real sapphires have more clarity." They didn't. Real sapphires, especially unheated salon sapphires of that size, had exactly that depth, that inner glow, that slight veil of silk inclusions that proved they hadn't been cooked in a laboratory. But these women didn't know sapphires. They knew labels and price tags and the opinions of whoever spoke loudest. My father-in-law had many wonderful qualities, Kimberly said, reaching the crescendo of her performance. But taste in jewelry wasn't one of them. Poor Martha has a whole box of his little creations at home. Paste gems, costume pieces, things he probably bought at flea markets and pretended to make. She sighed theatrically. It's a perfect example of his poor, cheap taste. And Martha just can't let go. Victoria was recording. I could see the red light on her phone. I started. It's okay. Kimberly put a hand on my arm, her grip harder than it appeared. We don't need to talk about it. I just wanted you to meet some of my friends. But you must be tired, Martha. Women of a certain age need their rest. She leaned closer, her whisper carrying just far enough. Know your place. She released me and turned back to her audience, already launching into another story. The women followed, a flock of silk-wrapped sheep trailing their shepherd. I stood alone by the pillar, my hands trembling at my sides. The terrace doors were 20 feet away. An eternity, it felt like, crossing that marble floor with every eye in the room burning into my back. But I made it. Pushed through the doors into the October night, let the cold air hit my face like a slap. The garden terrace was empty except for the ghosts. Stone benches lined the pathways, boxwood hedges trimmed into perfect spheres, uplighting casting soft shadows on the ivy-covered walls. I sank onto the nearest bench and pressed my hands to my face. Henry. His name was a prayer, a plea, a scream trapped behind my teeth. I could feel him here, in the night air, in the silence, in the slow steadying of my breath. He had always been my calm in every storm, the voice that reminded me who I was when the world tried to make me small. You're stronger than you know, he used to say. You just forget sometimes. I had forgotten. For 3 years since his death, I had let myself shrink. Let Kimberly and Derek and even Brenda convince me that I was old, irrelevant, a relic of a time that no longer mattered. I had swallowed their cruelty like medicine, believing I deserved it. But I didn't deserve this. No one deserved this. I opened my clutch and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the darkness, showing the text from Gerald Finch. Confirming your 9 p.m. appointment. It was 8:47. Inside the ballroom, Kimberly was laughing, wearing my necklace, telling the world that my husband was a fraud and I was a fool. Inside the ballroom, my son was drinking himself into silence rather than defend his mother. Inside the ballroom, Victoria Langley was crafting a story that would cement Kimberly's triumph and my humiliation. But out here, in the cold and the dark and the quiet, I had something none of them knew about. I had the truth. I pulled up Gerald's number and pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Martha, I was wondering when you'd reach out. Gerald. My voice was steady now, calm. I need you to do something for me. Name it. Call the Ashford Police Department. Tell them there's been a theft, a registered high-value item. You have all the documentation. A pause, then softly. You're sure? I looked back at the ballroom doors, at the golden light spilling through the glass, at the shadows of people who had written me off. I'm sure. Consider it done. And Martha? Yes? Henry would be proud of you. I hung up and dialed another number. The non-emergency police line, the one I had memorized 2 years ago when I updated the insurance, when some quiet part of me knew this day might come. Ashford Police Department. How may I direct your call? My name is Martha Calloway, I said. I need to report a theft. The police officer on the phone was young. I could hear it in his voice, that particular blend of efficiency and uncertainty that comes with new authority. He took down my information with careful precision. My name, address, the nature of the theft, the estimated value. $1.5 million, ma'am. He repeated it slowly, as if testing whether I was serious or senile. That's correct. The item is registered with your department's high-value property division. My insurance agent, Gerald Finch, is sending over the documentation now. Photographs, gemological certificates, provenance records. And you say your daughter-in-law is currently wearing the item? At the Ashford Grand Ballroom? Yes, the charity gala for the Children's Hospital. A pause, papers shuffling. We'll send officers to the location, Mrs. Calloway. Please remain available. I'll be here. I hung up and sat for a moment in the cold October air, letting the reality settle over me like a second skin. There was no going back now. The machinery was in motion, insurance agents, police officers, documentation older than my daughter-in-law's marriage to my son. In an hour, maybe less, Kimberly would learn what happens when you steal from someone who has nothing left to lose. But first, I needed to remember why I was doing this. Not for revenge, not entirely. For Henry. My husband never called himself a jeweler. He said the word was too small for what he did, too commercial. I'm a craftsman, he would say, turning a stone in his fingers, catching the light. Anyone can set a diamond. I make them sing. He learned the trade in Antwerp, Belgium, in the years after Korea. He'd enlisted at 18, served 2 years as a mechanic in Seoul, and came home with nightmares he never discussed and a hunger for beauty he couldn't explain. A friend of a friend knew a master jeweler in the diamond district, an old Belgian named Vanderberg, who took on 1 apprentice per decade. Henry wrote him a letter, then another, then 12 more over 2 years, each one detailing what he had taught himself, what he had made, what he dreamed of making. Vanderberg finally relented. To stop the letters, he claimed, though Henry said the old man had smiled when he said it. For 6 years, Henry learned. Not just the technical skills, the settings and solders, the angles and alloys, but the philosophy. Vanderberg believed that every stone had a soul, a particular way it wanted to be held, a light it was born to catch. A craftsman's job wasn't to impose his vision, but to listen. The stone tells you what it wants to be, Henry would say, decades later, in the basement workshop on Winthrop Lane. You just have to be patient enough to hear it. He came home to Connecticut in 1962, opened a small shop on Main Street, and spent the next 50 years doing what he loved. Most people knew him as the man who fixed watches and replaced batteries, who restrung pearls for old ladies and resized rings for nervous grooms. They had no idea what he created in the back room, or what those pieces were worth. Henry never cared about fame, never wanted galleries or collectors or his name in magazines. He made jewelry for the joy of it, selling pieces quietly to a small circle of clients who understood what they were buying. The necklace he made for me, the Sapphire, took him 18 months. He found the stone at an estate sale in Boston, a 22-carat Ceylon sapphire that had been dismissed as too dark by every dealer who'd examined it. Henry saw something else. He saw depth, fire, a universe trapped in blue. He worked on it in secret, staying late in the shop, coming home with stone dust in his hair and that particular gleam in his eye. I knew he was making something special. I could always tell, but I didn't ask. That was our agreement. His work was his meditation, his prayer. He would share it when he was ready. On our wedding night, after the ceremony and the reception and the drive to the little inn in Vermont where we'd spend our honeymoon, he handed me a navy velvet box. "I made you something," he said. I opened it. The sapphire caught the lamplight and threw it back in 1,000 shades of blue, midnight and ocean, twilight and storm. The diamonds surrounding it were flawless, arranged in a cascade that seemed to move, to flow, like water frozen in the moment before it fell. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "It's called a rivière," Henry said. "A river. Because that's what I want our life to be, Martha. Always moving, always beautiful, always finding our way to the sea." I wore it that night, and our anniversary every year after, and the day we brought Derek home from the hospital, and the day we buried Derek's grandmother, and the night Henry died, when I lay beside his body in the hospital room, the necklace cold against my chest, and told him I would never forget what he made, what we had, what he gave me. Now Kimberly was wearing it like a costume. I stood, smoothed my gown, and walked back into the ballroom. Something had changed in the 20 minutes I'd been outside. The energy had shifted, crystallized around a new center of gravity. People were clustered near the main stage, champagne forgotten, conversations hushed. Edmund Ashworth had arrived. I recognized him from the photographs in Henry's workshop. A tall, angular man with silver hair and the sharp eyes of someone who had spent 50 years seeing what others missed. Ashworth was a legend in the jewelry world, a gemologist whose authentication could make or break a fortune. He had examined the crown jewels, appraised the Hope diamond, testified in a dozen high-profile theft cases. He was also, according to the Gala program, the guest of honor. Ashworth moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to being watched. He shook hands, accepted compliments, deflected questions with a smile that never reached his eyes. I had seen that look before, on Henry, when customers asked him to authenticate pieces he knew were fake. The weariness of expertise, surrounded by ignorance. Kimberly had noticed him too. She was working her way across the room, champagne glass in hand, the necklace blazing against her collarbone. I watched her calculate the approach, the angle, the timing, the precise moment when she could insert herself into his orbit without appearing desperate. She was good at this, I had to admit it. 8 years of watching her workrooms had taught me that much. She knew how to make an entrance feel like a coincidence, how to turn a conversation into an audience, how to leave people feeling like they'd been chosen. But she didn't know what she was wearing. And she didn't know who Edmund Ashworth really was. It happened faster than I expected. Ashworth was speaking with Gloria Ashworth, no relation, despite the name, when his gaze drifted over her shoulder and stopped. I saw the moment of recognition, the slight widening of his eyes, the way his body went still. He was looking at the necklace. Kimberly didn't notice. She was mid-sentence, laughing at something Gloria had said, performing charm like a circus act. But Ashworth wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the sapphire with an expression I knew intimately, the look of a man who has found something he thought was lost. He excused himself from Gloria and crossed the room. Kimberly saw him coming and straightened, her smile brightening into something she probably thought was irresistible. "Mr. Ashworth, what an honor! I'm Kimberly Calloway. I chair the junior auxiliary for the hospital board." "Mrs. Calloway." He took her offered hand but didn't shake it, just held it for a moment, his eyes never leaving her neck. "Forgive me, but I couldn't help noticing your necklace." Kimberly's hand went to the sapphire, her fingers caressing it the way she'd done all night. "This old thing? It's a family piece, sentimental value mostly. May I?" He gestured toward the stone. "Of course." Ashworth leaned in, his expert eyes scanning the setting, the stones, the particular way the platinum caught the light. I held my breath. The room seemed to hold its breath with me. His expression shifted. The polite interest became something else, something sharper, almost reverent. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small loop, the kind gemologists use for close examination. "Mrs. Calloway," he said slowly, "where did you get this piece?" Kimberly laughed, that brittle sound I knew so well. "I told you, it's a family heirloom, my mother-in-law's. She has a whole collection of her late husband's little projects." Little projects. Ashworth repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. He straightened, removing the loop, and looked at Kimberly with an expression I will treasure until the day I die. "Mrs. Calloway, I've seen this necklace before. Or rather, I've seen photographs of it, in a private collection catalog from Vanderburg's estate." Kimberly blinked. "I don't understand." Vanderburg was the greatest jeweler of the 20th century. He only authenticated work he considered masterpieces. Ashworth paused. This piece was in his catalog. It was created by one of his students, a man he called the most talented apprentice he ever trained. The blood drained from Kimberly's face. Ashworth turned, scanning the room. I would very much like to meet the person who made this. Is the original owner here? His eyes found mine across the ballroom, and in the distance, through the terrace doors I had left open, I heard sirens. Edmund Ashworth had the room now. Every eye, every breath, every whispered question, all of it focused on him and the necklace blazing against Kimberly's throat. He didn't seem to notice or care. His attention was fixed on the sapphire with the intensity of a man reunited with a lost love. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying without effort, "I apologize for interrupting the evening's festivities, but I've just made a rather extraordinary discovery." The crowd pressed closer. Gloria Ashworth leaned in. Diane Pemberton set down her champagne. Even the mayor stopped his conversation mid-sentence. "This necklace," Ashworth continued, gesturing toward Kimberly, "is not costume jewelry. It is not a family trinket or a sentimental keepsake." He paused, letting the silence build. "It is a masterpiece. A 22-carat unheated Salon sapphire surrounded by 14 carats of D-flawless diamonds in a platinum Riviere setting. I would estimate its current market value at approximately $2 million. Perhaps more, given its provenance." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Kimberly's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Confusion, disbelief, then something that looked almost like triumph. Her hand went to the necklace, possessive now rather than dismissive. $2 million? She laughed high and bright. "Well, I always knew it was special. It's been in my husband's family for generations." "Has it?" Ashworth raised an eyebrow. "Because the craftsman who made this piece trained under Vanderberg himself. I have photographs of this exact necklace in Vanderberg's authentication catalog from 1985. He turned to scan the room again. "The creator's name was Henry Calloway. Is there anyone here who might know?" "That's my husband." My voice cut through the murmurs. I stepped forward, away from the pillar where I'd been watching, into the circle of light surrounding Kimberly and Ashworth. The crowd parted for me, whether from respect or morbid curiosity, I couldn't tell. "My late husband," I clarified. "Henry made that necklace for me 40 years ago, on our wedding day." Ashworth's face softened. "Mrs. Calloway, I'm deeply honored. Your husband's work was—" "Wait." Kimberly held up a hand, her voice sharp. "Martha, what are you doing? This is my necklace. You gave it to me." "I did no such thing." "Derek." Kimberly spun toward my son, who had risen from table 1 and was standing frozen at its edge. "Derek, tell them. Your mother gave me this necklace. Tell them." Derek's mouth opened, closed. His eyes found mine across the room, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. Deep, drowning shame. Kimberly, I don't think—" "Tell them!" Before he could answer, the ballroom doors swung open. 2 police officers entered, a man and a woman, both young, both professionally blank-faced. They scanned the room with the practiced efficiency of people who had interrupted parties before. The woman held a folder. The man had his hand resting near his belt. The sirens I'd heard earlier had fallen silent, but their echo seemed to hang in the air. "We're looking for a Mrs. Kimberly Calloway," the female officer announced. The crowd shifted, creating a clear path between the officers and Kimberly. She stood frozen, the $2 million necklace glittering against her chest, her face finally showing something real. Fear. "I'm Kimberly Calloway." Her voice had lost its music. "What is this about?" "Ma'am, we've received a report of theft, a high-value item registered with the Ashford Police Department." The officer opened her folder, producing papers I recognized. The insurance documents, the photographs, the gemological certificates Gerald had filed 2 years ago. "A Salon sapphire and diamond Riviere necklace, valued at $1.5 million, reported stolen this evening by its owner, Martha Calloway. Stolen? Kimberly's laugh was hollow now. That's absurd. This is costume jewelry. It's worth maybe $200. Martha is confused. She's old. She doesn't understand. Ma'am, the male officer stepped forward. We have documentation confirming the item's value and registration. We also have a written statement from the owner describing how the item was taken without permission. Written statement? Kimberly looked at me, and for the first time, I saw her truly see me. Not the old woman she'd dismissed, not the obstacle she'd schemed to remove, but an adversary, an equal, a threat. Martha, what did you do? I reached into my clutch and withdrew the note. The one she'd left on my dresser that morning, with its cruel words in her own handwriting. You wrote this, I said, my voice steady. You admitted to taking the necklace. You called it a glass trinket and said nobody would know it was fake. I handed the note to the female officer. That's evidence of intent, I believe. The officer examined the note, then showed it to her partner. They exchanged a look. Mrs. Calloway, the female officer said to Kimberly, I'm going to have to ask you to remove the necklace and come with us. This is insane! Kimberly's composure finally shattered. Derek, do something! But Derek didn't move. He stood at the edge of table 1, pale as paper, watching his wife like a man seeing her for the first time. Pamela pushed through the crowd, emerald gown billowing. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can sort this out privately. My daughter is a respected member of this community. Ma'am, please step back. Do you know who we are? Do you know who her father-in-law was? This is harassment. This is... Ma'am. The male officer's voice hardened. Step back, or I'll have to detain you as well. Pamela stepped back. Victoria Langley's phone was raised, capturing everything. The puff piece about Kimberly's social triumph had just become something very different. The handcuffs caught the chandelier light, silver against Kimberly's wrists, stark and final. The female officer applied them with practiced efficiency, while the male officer carefully removed the necklace. He placed it in an evidence bag, handling it with the reverence Ashworth had shown, the respect it deserved. Kimberly Calloway, you're being detained for questioning regarding the theft of property valued over $1 million. The officer recited the words without emotion. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights faded into background noise. I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching Kimberly's face as the reality settled over her. The handcuffs, the officers, the 300 witnesses, the photographer from the Gazette snapping pictures, Victoria's phone recording every second. 8 years of climbing. 8 years of scheming and manipulating and tearing my family apart. And it ended here, in the ballroom, where she'd planned her greatest triumph, wearing the necklace she'd stolen to humiliate me. The officers led her toward the door. She walked stiffly, head down, the emerald train of her gown dragging across the marble floor. At the threshold, she turned back. Her eyes found Derek first. He looked away. Then they found me. This isn't over, she whispered. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The doors closed behind her, and the ballroom erupted into whispers. The whispers faded slowly like waves retreating from shore. Edmund Ashworth approached me with the evidence bag in his hands. He had spoken with the officers, explained the necklace's significance, vouched for its provenance. They agreed to release it into my custody pending the investigation. The documentation was airtight, and Kimberly's own note proved her guilt beyond question. Mrs. Calloway, he held out the bag. I believe this belongs to you. I took it with trembling fingers. The sapphire glowed through the plastic, blue fire undimmed by everything it had witnessed. I opened the seal and lifted the necklace free, feeling its familiar weight settle into my palm. 40 years. 40 years since Henry had placed it around my neck in that little inn in Vermont, his hands warm, his eyes bright with love. 40 years of anniversaries and ordinary Tuesdays, of arguments and reconciliations, of building a life that felt like it would last forever. Nothing lasts forever. I knew that now. But some things endure. Thank you, Henry, I whispered, so quietly that only the Sapphire could hear. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for making me strong enough. The stone caught the chandelier light and threw it back in 1,000 shades of blue. Mom. Derek's voice broke on the word. He stood 3 feet away, close enough to touch, but holding himself back, as if he'd lost the right to proximity. His face was wet. When had he started crying? I hadn't noticed. Mom, I'm sorry. He shook his head, the words inadequate, and he knew it. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see. You didn't want to see. He flinched. You're right. I didn't. It was easier to believe her, to go along, to pretend everything was fine. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so achingly familiar. My little boy, crying over a scraped knee, a broken toy, a world that didn't make sense. I abandoned you. After Dad died, when you needed me most, I abandoned you. Yes, I said. You did. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at my son, 40 years old, successful by every external measure, and utterly broken in this moment. I thought of Henry, who had always believed in second chances, who had always said that people could change if they wanted it badly enough. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'm willing to find out. He sobbed, a raw, ugly sound, and stepped forward. I let him. His arms went around me, and for the first time in 3 years, I held my son. It won't be easy, I murmured into his shoulder. You have a lot to make up for. I know, and I won't pretend it didn't happen. I won't forget. I know, Mom. I know. I pulled back, cupped his face in my hands the way I used to when he was small. But you're my son, and I love you. That hasn't changed. He nodded, tears still falling. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a door left open. A path he could walk if he chose. The ballroom had rearranged itself around us, conversations resuming, champagne flowing, the machinery of society grinding forward. But the glances that found me now were different, curious, respectful, perhaps even admiring. I didn't care about their admiration. I never had. I walked to the bar and asked for a glass of champagne. Dom Perignon, 2012. The same vintage Kimberly had been drinking at table 1. The bartender poured it with a small smile, and I took it to the terrace doors, looking out at the garden where I had made my calls. The necklace was warm in my hand. I lifted it, unclasped it, and fastened it around my neck. The sapphire settled against my collarbone, exactly where it belonged. A river, Henry had called it. Always moving, always beautiful, always finding its way to the sea. I had found my way. Through grief and betrayal and the long, cold years of isolation. Through a sister's treachery and a daughter-in-law's cruelty and a son's abandonment. Through the silence of an empty house and the weight of memories that never faded. I had found my way back to myself. I raised my glass to the night sky, to the stars Henry used to name for me, to the man who had loved me completely and left me stronger than I knew. To you, my love, I whispered. Always to you. The champagne was perfect, cold and bright and just a little bit sweet. I drank it slowly, savoring every drop, while the sapphire blazed against my heart,